Well, here we go then. Session 4B, The Coming Kingdom, Part 2. As time marched on, more specifics regarding the coming kingdom were revealed. Meanwhile, the prophecies of doom for disobedience were fulfilled, and soon all the believers had was the hope of a future kingdom coming to pass because they had been sold into captivity. The northern 10 tribes had been assimilated by Assyria and scattered throughout Mesopotamia and were assimilated into the people and were lost. The southern 2 tribes were carried captive to Babylon, and then after Babylon was conquered, the first king of Persia let them come home if they wanted to. Let's go to Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 2. We're going to see some of these things upon which the Jewish eschatology was built. Isaiah chapter 2, verse 1. The word that Isaiah, the son of Amos, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. It shall come to pass in the last days, so this is still future, that the mountains of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it. And many people shall go and say, Come ye, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And he shall judge among all the nations, and shall rebuke many people. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. So that's a famous prophecy, isn't it? And the things that we can learn from it is that the law will be in effect then. Okay? So that is the 6th administration during the period of time of the book of Revelation when the millennial kingdom shall occur. Isaiah 7, another one. Isaiah 7. Look at verse 14. Therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. Butter and honey shall he eat, that he may know to refuse the evil and choose the good. For before the child shall know to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land that thou abhorrest shall be forsaken of both her kings. And the Lord shall bring upon thee, and upon thy people, and upon thy father's house, days that have not come, from the day that Ephraim departed from Judah, even the king of Assyria. So, Isaiah 7, this is a prophecy that was fulfilled twice. The first time it was fulfilled was during the life of Isaiah, shortly after it was given, that he may know to refuse the evil and choose the good. Well, how could that be of Jesus? Right? But there was a second fulfillment of verse 14. A virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and call his name Emmanuel. That was Jesus. So this prophecy here has a dual fulfillment. Isn't that interesting? Isaiah 9:6 is another one. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder. So this is about the Messiah, and he will be the king. And his name shall be called Marvel of a Counselor, the Strong Mighty Hero, the Father of Everlastingness, the Prince of Peace. Of course, I cover more about that in my classes about Jesus Christ. Verse 7, of the increase of his government there shall be no end upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. So that's a prophecy, and that also has a dual fulfillment. The first time that Jesus comes, he's called those things, and when he comes back, he'll be called those things. And that's when the government will be upon his shoulder. And that's when he'll do verse 7. Isn't that interesting? Isaiah 11, verse 1. I taught about this in the One Spirit class. And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. So the stem of Jesse, that's David. A branch, that's Jesus' nickname. He was the branch. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him. The Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and of the fear of the Lord. So verse 2 is a cataloging of the capabilities of the Spirit that Jesus had without measure and what the Old Testament believers had portions of. It corresponds to 1 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 3. And shall make him of quick understanding in the reverence of the Lord, and he shall not judge after the sight of his eyes, neither reprove after the hearing of his ears. But with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and reprove with equity for the meek of the earth. And he shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips shall he slay the wicked. And righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins, and faithfulness the girdle of his reins. The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. And the cow and the bear shall feed, their young ones shall lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. Now, this prophecy is mixed. Some of it occurred when Jesus came the first time. Some of it will occur when he comes the next time. All right? Really interesting. Verse 12. Oh, look at verse 11. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria, and from Egypt, and from Pathros, from Cush, and from Elam, from Shinar, from Hamath, and from the lands of the sea. Now, the first time that he recovered a remnant, that was just Judah out of Babylon. The second time, he's going to do it in the future, in the book of Revelation, when the Jews are called. Isn't that interesting? See? So this tells us some information about when this is going to be fulfilled. Verse 12, and he shall set up an ensign for all the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. All right? So we're seeing more and more information now in these latter books about the kingdom. Isaiah 14, verse 1. For the Lord will have mercy on Jacob, and will yet choose Israel, and set them in their own land, and the strangers shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob, and the people shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and for handmaids. It's talking about, guess who? The Gentiles. And they shall take them captives, whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors. Well, when's that going to happen? It hasn't happened yet, has it? No. That's the millennial kingdom. Verse 3, and it shall come to pass in the day that the Lord shall give thee rest from thy sorrow, from thy fear, from the hard bondage wherein thou wast made to serve. Now, we don't have time to read the whole book of Isaiah, but the summary is that in the first half, Isaiah prophesies of the fate of the northern kingdoms to fall to Assyria, and aid from Egypt would not be effective. And then he also prophesied that only God can deliver the southern kingdom from the Assyrian threat that was growing. During Hezekiah's reign, Assyria conquered Israel and scattered the northern 10 tribes. I think that was 723 BC. And their oblivion fulfilled all the prophecies that had gone before. Assyria then threatened Judah. Nineveh was the capital of Assyria. There was a time before this that a prophet was sent to Nineveh to prophesy to them, and he didn't want to go. He wanted Assyria to get the effects of God's judgment. That prophet's name was Jonah. Remember? He did not want to go to Assyria because he foresaw what Assyria was going to do to Judah and Israel. And he didn't want to bless them. He didn't even want to give them a chance to obey the word. And God said, no, you got to go. And then Jonah finally went, prophesied, and the Assyrians believed him. And so that's one of the reasons why the kingdom of Assyria arose to be so strong. Then the midsection records an incident, a very pivotal incident, that dreaded Assyrian army came up against Hezekiah. They besieged Jerusalem, and they sent messengers, and they blasphemed God, and they said, don't believe Hezekiah, don't believe these prophets that say that God's going to deliver you, because we're the Assyrians, and we've wiped out everybody else, and their gods didn't help them. But that was a big mistake, because it only took one prayer by Isaiah, and the Assyrian army was decimated by a plague, and shortly thereafter the king was assassinated, and that led to the downfall of the country of Assyria. It changed world history. One prayer. And then Babylon arose and conquered Assyria. And then in the second half of the book, Isaiah prophesies that Judah will fall to Babylon and be carried away into captivity because of their sins. But also interspersed throughout, more future details are revealed. That a king named Cyrus would let them go back home and rebuild the temple. That was predicted 200 years before the fact, and his name mentioned. There are other prophecies that will be fulfilled in the return to Jerusalem, which is still future for us. They will happen in the millennial kingdom. In Isaiah 44, verse 24, thus saith the Lord thy Redeemer, and he that forms thee from the womb. I am the Lord that makes all things, that stretches forth the heaven alone, that spreads abroad the earth by myself. He that frustrateth the tokens of the liars, and makes diviners mad, that turns wise men backward, and makes their knowledge foolish, that confirms the word of his servant, and performs the counsel of his messengers, that said to Jerusalem, you shall be inhabited. Well, Isaiah prophesied this while Jerusalem was still inhabited. Well, that implies there will be a time that it won't be. And to the cities of Judah you shall be built, and I will raise the decayed places thereof, that said to the deep, be dry, and I will dry up thy rivers, that said to Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and shall perform all my pleasure, even saying to Jerusalem, thou shalt be built, and to the temple thy foundation shall be laid. Verse 28 was spoken while the first temple still existed. Wow. Can you imagine what the priests thought of Isaiah? Woo. But he was a faithful messenger. Chapter 45, verse 1. Thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have held, to subdue nations before him. I will loose the loins of kings, to open before him the two-leaved gates. The gates shall not be shut. I will go before thee, and make the crooked places straight. I will break in pieces the gates of brass, and cut in sunder the bars of iron. Who had brass gates with iron bars? The city of Babylon. So this predicts that Cyrus will conquer Babylon. Verse 3, and I'll give thee the treasures of darkness, and hidden riches of secret places, that you may know that I, the Lord, which call thee by thy name, am the God of Israel. For Jacob my servant's sake, and Israel mine elect, I have even called thee by thy name, 200 years ahead, And I have surnamed thee, though thou hast not known me. Wow. So Isaiah predicted the temple would be rebuilt even before it had been destroyed. And the gates of brass were the city of Babylon that Cyrus would conquer. He diverted a river and marched in on the dry river bed. That's what Cyrus did. Wow. Also in the second half of Isaiah, amongst the encouragements for Israel to wake up, are prophecies of a future gathering of all the Jews and that the Gentiles would serve them. This still future event is the millennial kingdom in the book of Revelation. Isaiah chapter 51, verse 9. Awake, awake, put on strength, O arm of the Lord. Awake as in the ancient days, in the generations of old. Art thou not it that hath cut Rahab and wounded the dragon? Art thou not it which hath dried the sea, the waters of the great deep, and hath made the depths of the sea a way for the ransom to pass over? Therefore the redeemed of the Lord shall return, and shall come with singing unto Zion, and everlasting joy shall be upon their head. They shall obtain gladness and joy, and sorrow and mourning shall flee away. I, even I, am he that comforts you. Who art thou, that thou shouldest be afraid of a man that shall die, and the Son of Man, which shall be made as grass? So that's the future kingdom. The prophet Micah was a contemporary of Isaiah and confirmed his prophecies. He was part of the team. Micah 4:1. In the last days shall come to pass that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established in the top of the mountains, and it shall be exalted above the hills, and the people shall flow unto it. Well, Isaiah had a similar prophecy. And many nations shall come and say, Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, and to the house of the God of Israel, and he will teach us his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For the law shall go forth of Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge among many people, and rebuke strong nations afar off, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares, their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up a sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. Micah 4, verse 6. In that day, saith the Lord, I will assemble her that halteth, and I will gather her that's driven out, and her that I have afflicted. And I will make her that halted a remnant, and her that was cast afar off a strong nation. And the Lord shall reign over them in Mount Zion from henceforth even forever. And thou, O tower of the flock, stronghold of the daughter of Zion, unto thee shall it come. Even the first dominion, the kingdom shall come to the daughter of Jerusalem. So these prophecies were still future. Again, here's another one. Micah 5:2. But thou, Bethlehem, Ephratah, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me that shall be ruler in Israel. That's prophesying that Jesus would be born in Bethlehem. Isn't that interesting? Isaiah 60, verse 1. Awake, arise, shine, for thy light is come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon you. For behold, the darkness shall cover the earth, and gross darkness the people. But the Lord shall arise upon thee, and his glory shall be seen upon thee. And the Gentiles shall come to thy light, and the kings to the brightness of thy rising. Lift up thine eyes round about, and see, all they that gather themselves together, and come unto thee. Thy sons shall come from afar, and thy daughters shall be nursed at thy side. Then thou shalt see and flow together, and thine heart shall reverence, and be enlarged, because the abundance of the sea shall be converted unto thee, and the forces of the Gentiles shall come unto thee. So there are prophecies about the millennial kingdom. Isaiah 60, verse 19. The sun shall be no more thy light by day, neither for brightness shall the moon give light unto thee. But the Lord shall be unto thee an everlasting light, and God thy glory. And the sun shall no more go down, neither shall thy moon withdraw itself. But the Lord shall be thine everlasting light, and the days of thy mourning shall be ended. Thy people also shall be all righteous. They shall inherit the land forever. the branch of my planting, the work of my hands, that I may be glorified. A little one shall become 1,000, and a small one a strong nation. I, the Lord, will hasten it in his time. Wow. There's just so many of these. Here's another one, Isaiah 61. Verse 1, the Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord hath anointed me to preach good tidings to the meek. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to them that are bound, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord, and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all that mourn, to appoint unto them that mourn in Zion, to give them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they might be called trees of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he might be glorified. And they shall build the old waste places. They shall raise up the former desolations. They shall repair the waste cities, the desolations of many generations. And strangers shall stand and feed your flocks, and the sons of the alien shall be your plowmen and your vine dressers. But you shall be named the priests of the Lord. Men shall call you the ministers of our God. You shall eat the riches of the Gentiles, and in their glory you shall boast yourselves. Now, this prophecy is of the millennial kingdom, but Jesus read it up to a certain point and stopped, because there's a dual fulfillment for this. The first half, Isaiah 61, verses 1 through the first half of verse 2, that was fulfilled when Jesus read it. But then, the day of vengeance of our God, that didn't happen. So the rest of the prophecy is future. Isn't that interesting? So all these were regarding the millennial kingdom, and then Jesus adapted that one part. After Hezekiah, now this is Isaiah that prophesied this. After Hezekiah's glorious reign was divinely extended by 15 years, his son Manasseh came into power, but Manasseh did evil in the sight of the Lord. He even had Isaiah executed. Judah had its last gasps of independence while Babylon was on the rise, and it was during this last period that there was a king that did good in the sight of the Lord of Judah. His name was Josiah, and he fulfilled that prophecy against Jeroboam about that altar that would have men's bones burned on it. That was 300 years earlier. After him, Babylon grew in influence to the point where it set up their own choices as kings on the throne in Judah. It was during these last Judean kings' reigns that the prophet Jeremiah ministered. Jeremiah took up the same refrain as the earlier prophets, predicting the doom that would await the disobedient. He said, "Cooperate with Babylon." But the kings rebelled and paid a grave price. Ultimately, Judea was assimilated into the Babylonian Empire, and Jerusalem and the temple were destroyed. Jeremiah's prophecies gave more information about their captivity, about a future kingdom, and future Jewish returns to their homeland, the rise of Persia, which was the successor to Babylon. Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 11 talks about how Jeremiah was called. And in chapter 3, verse 15, God says, "I will give you pastors according to mine heart," not like the pastors that they had during Jeremiah's reign that abused the people. "And these shall feed you with knowledge and understanding. It shall come to pass when you be multiplied and increased in the land, in those days, saith the Lord, they shall say no more, the ark of the covenant of the Lord. Neither shall it come to mind, neither shall they remember it, neither shall they visit it, neither shall that be done anymore." So, in terms of the lost ark, it's gone. They're not going to utilize it anymore. Verse 17, at that time they shall call Jerusalem the throne of the Lord, and all the nations shall be gathered unto it, to the name of the Lord, to Jerusalem. Neither shall they walk any more after the imagination of their evil heart. So again, that's millennial kingdom. Chapter 23, verse 3. And I will gather the remnant of my flock out of all the countries whither I have driven them, and I will bring them again to their folds, and they shall be fruitful and increase. And I will set up shepherds over them, which shall feed them, and they shall fear no more, neither be dismayed, neither shall they be lacking, saith the Lord. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will raise unto David a righteous branch, and a king shall reign and prosper, and shall execute judgment and justice in the earth. In his days Judah shall be saved, and Israel shall dwell safely, and this is his name, whereby he shall be called the Lord our righteousness. Wow. Jeremiah 24, verse 4. Again, the word of the Lord came to me, saying, thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, like these good figs, so will I acknowledge them that are carried away captive to Judah, whom I have sent out of this place into the land of the Chaldeans for their good. And I will set mine eyes upon them for good, and I will bring them again to this land. And I will build them and not pull them down, and I will plant them and not pluck them up. And I will give them an heart to know me, that I am the Lord, and they shall be my people, and I will be their God, for they shall return unto me with their whole heart. Now this prophecy, this was fulfilled with Ezra and Nehemiah when they returned from Jerusalem. Jeremiah 25, verse 1. The word that came to Jeremiah concerning all the people of Judah in the 4th year of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah. That was the 1st year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. You get down to verse 9. Behold, I will send and take all the families of the north, saith the Lord, and Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant, and will bring them against this land, and against the inhabitants thereof, and against all the nations round about, and will utterly destroy them, and make them an astonishment, and a hissing, and perpetual desolations. Moreover, I will take from them the voice of mirth, and the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom, and the voice of the bride, and the sound of the millstones, and the light of the candle. That is utter devastation. The voice of mirth. There's going to be no good news. And the voice of gladness, nothing to make you happy. And the voice of the bridegroom and the voice of the bride. All the families are going to be broken up and carried off. And they're not going to make those decisions for their people anymore. The sound of the millstones. They're not going to harvest and make flour. They'll be captives. Wow. And the light of the candle. They won't even dwell in their own homes anymore. That's how devastating Babylon was. And this whole land shall be desolation and an astonishment. And these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. So this is the first prediction of the 70-year captivity. And there were 4 carryings away and 1 return. So the 70 years is non-accession counting from the beginning carrying away until the year that they were allowed to return. This whole land shall be desolate. Verse 12, it shall come to pass when 70 years are accomplished that I will punish the king of Babylon and that nation, saith the Lord, for their iniquity in the land of the Chaldeans, and I will make it a perpetual desolation. So the city of Babylon will suffer the same fate as Jerusalem. And I will bring upon that land all my words which I have pronounced against it, even all that is written in this book which Jeremiah hath prophesied against all the nations. Wow. Jeremiah 31. See, what I did in the past 2 weeks, I went through half the Old Testament and located every prophecy that talked about the future kingdom or the carrying away, and I've been reading them to you. This is what Jewish eschatology was built upon. Jeremiah 31. For there shall be a day that the watchmen upon the Mount Ephraim shall cry, Arise ye, let's go up to Zion, unto the land of our God. So that's northern Israel saying that. For thus saith the Lord, Sing with gladness for Jacob, and shout among the chief of the nations. Publish ye, praise ye, and say, O Lord, save thy people, the remnant of Israel. Behold, I will bring them from the north country, and gather them from the coasts of the earth, and with them the blind and the lame, the woman with child, and her that travaileth with child together. A great company shall return thither, and they shall come with weeping, and with supplication will I lead them. I will cause them to walk by the rivers of waters, in a straight way, wherein they shall not stumble. For I am a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn. Hear the word of the Lord, O ye nations, and declare it in the isles afar off, and say, He that scattered Israel will gather him, and keep him as a shepherd doth his flock. Wow. Keep on reading, and as you get down to verse 31, here's a famous prophecy. Jeremiah 31:31. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they broke. Although I was a husband unto them, saith the Lord, but this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my law in their inward parts, and write it in their hearts. I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And they shall teach no more every man his neighbor, and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, saith the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more. Wow. That's a very specific prophecy about what's going to happen in this future kingdom, in the millennial kingdom. That covenant is with Judah and Israel. That's what it says. Okay? Jeremiah 32. And now therefore, in verse 36, And now therefore saith the Lord the God of Israel, concerning this city, whereof you say, It shall be delivered into the hand of the king of Babylon, by the sword and by famine and by pestilence. Behold, I will gather them out of all countries, whither I have driven them in mine anger, and in my fury, and my great wrath, and I will bring them again to this place, and I will cause them to dwell safely, and they shall be my people, and I will be their God. And I will give them one heart and one way, that they may reverence me forever, for the good of them and their children after them. And I will make an everlasting covenant with them, that I will not turn away from them, to do them good, but I will put my reverence in their hearts, that they shall not depart from me. See, that's still future. Jeremiah 33:14. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will perform that good thing which I have promised to the house of Israel and to the house of Judah. In those days, at that time, will I cause the branch of righteousness to grow up unto David, and he shall execute judgment and righteousness in the land. In those days shall Judah be saved, and Jerusalem shall dwell safely. And this is the name whereof she shall be called, the Lord our righteousness. Now, some people claim this is when Jesus came. No, can't be, because that's when Judah was not saved and Jerusalem did not dwell safely. They were under the Roman dominion. For thus saith the Lord, David shall never want a man to sit upon the throne of the house of Israel. Well, that certainly didn't happen when Jesus first came. All right? It will happen when he comes the next time. Neither shall the priests of Levites want a man before me to offer burnt offering, and to kindle meat offerings, and to do sacrifice continually. Well, in 70 AD, that stopped when the second temple was destroyed. So this all has to be future. All right? So what Jeremiah predicted came to pass. Babylon wiped out Jerusalem, and the upper class was decimated. Most of the rest of the people were carried off to Babylon. Their houses, the city walls, and the temple were destroyed. All that were left were the poor, who the Babylonians let take over the fields. Jeremiah even was released by the Babylonians and told he was free to go wherever he wanted. The remaining Jews all fled to Egypt against the advice of Jeremiah. So they left the land empty, and they were destroyed in Egypt, as Jeremiah predicted. So the land laid fallow with no inhabitant for the rest of the 70-year captivity. The Babylonians later were conquered by the Medes and the Persians, and the city of Babylon was destroyed. So then we get to the book of Lamentations. Lamentations was after the temple was destroyed in the summer of 586 BC, when Jerusalem was conquered. Lamentation is a dirge. Yet, in the middle of it is this gem. Lamentations chapter 3, verse 20. My soul hath them still in remembrance, and is humbled in me. This I recall to my mind, therefore have I hope. It is of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. There's a wonderful hymn about that. The Lord is my portion, saith my soul. Therefore will I hope in him. The Lord is good unto them that wait for him, to the soul that seeks him. It is good that a man should both hope and quietly wait for the salvation of the Lord. So that's in the middle of Lamentations. The next prophet is Ezekiel. He ministered to the captives who had been carried away to Babylon. And his prophecies bear the same traits as Isaiah and Jeremiah, predicting doom to those who disobeyed, yet intermixed throughout are prophecies with hopeful content. So Ezekiel 11, verse 16 is a sample. Therefore say, thus saith the Lord God, although I have cast them far off among the heathen, and although I have scattered them among the countries, yet will I be to them as a little sanctuary in the countries where they shall come. Therefore say, thus saith the Lord God, I will even gather you from the people, and assemble you out of the countries where you've been scattered, and I will give you the land of Israel. And they shall come thither, and they shall take away all the detestable things thereof, and all the abominations thereof from thence. And I will give them one heart, and I will put a new spirit within you. And I will take the stony heart out of their flesh, and give them a heart of flesh, that they may walk in my statutes, and keep mine ordinances, and do them, that they shall be my people, and I will be their God. See, again, future. Chapter 34, verse 11, where he's prophesying against the abusive pastors. And verse 11, for thus saith the Lord God, behold, I, even I, will both search my sheep, seek them out, as a shepherd seeks out his flock in the day that he is among his sheep that are scattered. So will I seek out my sheep, and will deliver them out of all places where they've been scattered in the cloudy and dark day. And I will bring them out from the people, and gather them from the countries, and I will bring them to their own land, and feed them upon the mountains of Israel, by the rivers, and in all the inhabited places of the country. And I will feed them in a good pasture, and upon the high mountains of Israel shall their fold be. There shall they lie in a good field, and in a fat pasture shall they feed upon the mountain of Israel. I will feed my flock, and I will cause them to lie down, saith the Lord God, and I will seek them that were lost, and bring again that which is driven away, and will bind up that which was broken, and will strengthen that which was sick, but I will destroy the fat and the strong, and I will feed them with judgment. Wow. Chapter 34, verse 22. Therefore I will save my flock, they shall be no more a prey, and I will judge between cattle and cattle, and I will set one shepherd over them, and he shall feed them, even my servant David. He shall feed them, and he shall be their shepherd. So there you have, again, more information about the millennial kingdom. Ezekiel 36, 23 through 28 is another one. Ezekiel 37, that whole chapter, is the famous chapter about the bones, them dry bones. And in verse 11, it says, Then said he unto me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. Behold, they say, Our bones are dried, and our hope is lost, and we're cast off of our parts. Therefore prophesy and say to them, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, O my people, I will open your graves, and cause you to come up out of your graves, and bring you into the land of Israel. And you shall know that I am the Lord, when I have opened your graves, O my people, and brought you up out of your graves, and shall put my spirit in you, and you shall live, and I shall place you in your own land. Then shall you know that I, the Lord, have spoken it and performed it, saith the Lord. Wow. So, in all these instances, the fulfillment of the prophecies were basically in four groupings. In all these prophets, the impending doom of being defeated by the Assyrians or Babylonians, then there being a period of captivity, then a return of captives to Judah, and then there were prophecies even beyond of the coming Messiah and predictions of the millennial kingdom. So, don't have much more time tonight, but I do want to start a little bit on the book of Daniel. In it, it's key to understand that there were no prophecies of the church. It was still a mystery. I'm going to explain that later. But there are many prophecies in the Bible, of course. But the detailed prophecies in the book of Daniel are among the most interesting and influential when it comes to eschatology. Many students of the Bible over the centuries have been drawn to the book of Daniel in an effort to understand these predictions. Parts of them have already been fulfilled, and the outcomes were so accurate that critics have charged that scribe added the details after the fact. But if that were the case, then why haven't all the rest of the prophecies in the Old Testament been edited? The Dead Sea Scrolls contain the book of Daniel in its present form, which disproves the skeptic's argument. We understand that the holy men spake as they were moved by the Holy Spirit, but they learned what they learned from God, and He told them the future. So that's not a big thing to dispute. I think God knows what the future is. You know? When Daniel was carried away to Babylon, he was chosen from the rest of the captives because of his intelligence and wisdom, his spirituality. And so he and his companions were taught the language and knowledge of the Babylonians so they could function in the court of the king of Babylon. That's what the king did to every conquered country. He would get the best to come and be in his court. It's often the case that when believers find themselves in pivotal positions, that their ministries also expand in scope. And that happened for Daniel. They distinguished themselves above the rest of the king's advisors in the matters of wisdom and understanding. There are 9 prophetic sections in the book of Daniel, some of which have eschatological import. And many students of the Bible have been fascinated by the possibility to understand some of the things that have not yet occurred. They come from many backgrounds and many levels of knowledge, and these scholars applied what they knew in an effort to decipher the predictions. The result has been a wide range of theories and claims about the future. As is the case with many religious things, once some prominent theologian says so-and-so, or once some well-known scholar voiced their opinion, right or wrong, afterward many others just lined up with them. But truth is not a democracy where the majority rules. Truth is truth, even if no one believes it. So the first prophecy, and all we're going to cover tonight, is Daniel chapter 2. This is that famous account of King Nebuchadnezzar that dreamed a dream and was so troubled by it and then forgot the dream. And so he challenged his advisors, tell me the dream and the interpretation thereof. And if you guys can't, then what good are you all you advisors? I'm just going to kill you. And that included Daniel. So he prayed, and God told him what it was. And in chapter 2, verse 19, then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. And Daniel blessed the God of heaven. I would too. And he answered and said, behold, blessed is the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. So he went to the king's man, Arioch, and told him, I know the answer. And so, verse 27, verse 26, the king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, are you able to make known to me the dream which I have seen and the interpretation? Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, the secret which the king hath demanded, can't the wise men and the astrologers and the magicians and the soothsayers show the king? He's sort of rubbing it in their face. But there is a God in heaven that reveals secrets and makes known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Thy dream and the visions of thy head on thy bed are these. As for thee, O king, thy thoughts came into my mind upon thy bed of what should come to pass hereafter. And he that reveals secrets makes known to thee what shall come to pass. But as for me, the secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have, more than any living, but for their sakes that shall make known the interpretation of the king, that thou may know the thoughts of thy heart. Thou, O king, saw, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was awesome. This image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, and his feet part iron and part of clay. Thou sawest that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and broke them to pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, and that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. Wow, that's a vision, wouldn't you say? This is the dream, and we will tell you the interpretation thereof. Thou, O king, art the King of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom and power and strength and glory, that whereof the children of men dwell, and the beasts of the field, and the fowls of heaven, hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. And after thee shall arise another kingdom, inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, forasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and subdues all things. And as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in peace and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet and the toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, and there shall be in it of the strength of iron, forasmuch as thou sawest iron mixed with the miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part iron and part clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with the miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with the clay. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Forasmuch as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountains without hands, and that it brake in pieces the iron, brass, clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter, and the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof for sure. Well, this prophecy and its interpretation is pretty clear. Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian kingdom is the head of gold. The Persian Empire is the breast of silver. Alexander the Great and his generals, Greek Empire, is the torso of brass. And the Roman Empire is the legs of iron. The Roman Empire did split in two, so that it fits with half iron and half clay. And the rock made without hands is the Messiah, whose kingdom began during the Roman Empire. So that's how that fits. So this brings us close to the close of the Old Testament. All that's left is Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Daniel, Haggai, Zechariah, Zephaniah, and Malachi. During this latter period, Israel is at the whims and mercies of the great empires of the ancient world. Its location at the crossroads between Europe, Asia, and Africa put it in a highly contested zone, but one day Jerusalem will control the world from there, but not now. In the next session, we will analyze the last prophecies about the kingdom, as well as the light that Jesus revealed on this subject during his first coming. Now that this basis and this foundation is laid, we will be able to proceed with accuracy. Bless you.